as we talk about the confusion of economic policy in South Africa and impatient youth and a threatened business community, Zimbabwe is another country also going through its own motions. We've just been told of the government's decision to push through legislation that would compel foreign firms to sell 51% of their controlling interests to Zimbabweans. The deadline is early September. Joining us now to talk to us about this is Derek Matyszak. I think I said that right, Derek. I'm really pleased. He's a senior researcher at the Research and Advocacy Unit in Harare. Thanks for your time.
Yes, good evening.
Let's talk about this indigenization laws, ultimatums now being set for early September, companies having to come up with proper procedures. How do you read the situation?
Well, it's quite clear that the government notice that was issued giving the September deadline is completely invalid. And I've no doubt that if the companies are pushed to the line on this, they will take the issue to the courts and challenge the issue in the courts.
How legal is the indigenization policy? Because there are some people who are saying that it's a bill in Parliament. It's not an act of law. So actually there's no legal validity.
No, there's a legally passed Act of Parliament. In 2007, the Indigenisation Act was passed, but one needs to be very clear that the Act only allowed the minister to make regulations in relation to new investments in Zimbabwe and when a company was undergoing any kind of restructuring. In those circumstances, the minister was entitled to make regulations to allow for or compel 51% of the shares to be held by indigenous Zimbabweans. What subsequently happened is that the minister then passed regulations which didn't simply apply to new investments or companies that were restructuring, but purported to apply to all companies in Zimbabwe. And that's where those regulations face legal difficulties.
So in the midst of those nuances, for companies that believe that the codes are in violation of the law, do they have legal recourse? And of course, given Zimbabwe's history with the rule of law, would the courts work in this instance?
Well, the judgment we get from our courts with any issue that has a political flavor are frequently very dubious, which is the kindest way one can put it. It's, of course, looming over the whole issue of indigenization is what happened over the land issue. And even where people had court orders, these were simply ignored, and the police quite openly said that they wouldn't intervene because the matter was political. And of course, what many companies are fearing is that a similar kind of illegal process will take place and they will not be given any protection through court orders or from the police.
Derek, let's deal with semantics here. Indigenization means local ownership of strategic assets. And yet people are almost treating this like it's nationalization, almost as if the government is saying it's going to take over some of these mining assets.
Well, that arises from the government notice that was purportedly issued in terms of the regulations themselves, setting this September deadline and basically saying if you don't hand over the shares to, or if you don't indigenize, we're going to compel you to hand your shares over to state institutions they intend to form for this purpose.
Let's talk about the affordability for black consortia that need to come to the fore and take up some of these shares. Where's the money going to come from? Because that's also been a contentious issue, is that many of these potential black shareholders can't raise the debt from the banks. The banks have their own sort of financial crises and capital adequacy issues. The government can't set aside a budget for it.
Yes. In the case of mining, the minister has basically indicated that they don't really intend to pay for any shares, and he's done this by saying, well, the mineral resources that you're mining belong to Zimbabweans anyway, so why should we have to pay for those? So there's this suggestion that mining shares, that if there's any payment made, it will certainly be nominal. In the case of other companies, even though there's a suggestion that there'll be payment for the shares, the issue of when is kept very cloudy, and the idea would be that, well, okay, we'll take the shares and then we'll pay you for them as and when we have the cash, but that might never happen.